All right, everyone. My name is Rishabh Kasarla. I am a third-year medical student, and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start off by telling you guys a story. So, 3 weeks ago, I took one of the most difficult exams in my entire life. I took step 1. It was tough, but going into the test, I felt a way that I have never felt when I was taking previous standardized exams, such as the MCAT or the SAT, or even if you go before that, NJASC. In fact, the way I felt was in such contrast to the way I used to feel walking into almost every single exam. And my journey to become the best learner I can be started around 10 years ago when I started high school. When I was in high school, I was a struggling student. I felt that I was always in this continuous cycle of falling behind, then trying my hardest and burning out, and then falling behind again. And that left me really, really frustrated because I was so scared of taking these simple high school tests. I remember I would get my score back in a class like history, very dense class. It's very difficult for me. And I would literally try to hide my grades from the rest of my friends because I was surrounded by some really, really smart people when I was in high school. Like my first test, I got a 40%. Like that's bad. But the thing is like, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get it for the next one. So I studied really hard for a week. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore, And then, I ended up falling behind again. Around the same time, I was watching TV with my family, and I saw this show called Superhumans. Has anyone heard of it before? It's like Fox News or a Fox show called Superhumans. Basically what they do on this show is they bring on people who claim to have these superhuman abilities, and they ask them to demonstrate in front of an audience. So I was watching this with my mom, dad, and my brother, and the person on the TV, his name was John Graham. John Graham, at the time, was the USA memory champion. What the heck is that, right? What he did was, on stage, he stood on one side, and from one side of the stage to the other, 20 runners ran past him. Each runner had a tag with a 6-digit number, a color, and their full name. 20 of them. And all they did was run past him. And during that little time, he was able to memorize every single detail on every single person's tag. Now that is a superhuman ability. Not only was he able to give the numbers for every single runner, forward and backward, but if you asked him, what was the last name of the 10th runner? Boom, he would tell you. What's the 6-digit number of the 15th runner? Boom, no hesitation, 100% accuracy. Something like that should not be possible. That is superhuman. But the best part about it was that in the post interview, he said that anyone can learn how to do this. That memory can actually be trained. And me, being that struggling kid in high school who couldn't memorize anything in my history class, I was like, I'm gonna do that. If anyone can actually do that, I will do that. And that kind of started my journey. 2 years in, I put in a lot of effort, and after 2 years, I was able to do the same thing that John Graham was able to do. In fact, I trained so hard at improving my memory that I decided to compete in the USA Memory Championship myself. And when I did, I placed it to the top 10 and made it to the finals round, and ended up placing 8th overall. I want to tell you something really cool about this story. When I was on stage for the final round, they asked each person, there's only 10 of us there, they asked each person to tell the audience how they got there, because no one has really heard about USA Memory Championship. It's such a niche little community. How have you heard about this? And I told them the story that I saw John Graham on TV, and it took me 2 years, but I wanted to get there. And then I said that person who inspired me is actually standing right there. At that USA Memory Championship final round that I was able to participate in, I actually participated against the person that I saw on TV. I ended up getting his number and now we're friends. Now, this seems like a really happy story, but the reason I'm telling the story is because I fell into a trap. The reason I was so dedicated to improving my memory was because I knew from a very young age that I wanted to become a doctor. I knew I wanted to go into medical school, and I knew that in medical school, there's a lot of information you have to know. You have to know everything in medical school, because if you don't, you could be sacrificing the safety of a patient. So you need to know everything. So that's why I improved my memory. And on my first exam in medical school, it didn't really go the way that I wanted to, despite knowing almost every single detail that I needed to know. So what went wrong? That's what I'm talking about in this presentation. That memory is not how you get there. There is a better way. We were all brainwashed into thinking, and definitely I was too, we were all brainwashed into thinking that we need to become these containers of information that can regurgitate whatever we learned on command or on an exam, but that's not the way it is. So what is the way? That's what I want to talk about in this presentation. So this is not a presentation about how to study. I'm not going to tell you to use the Pomodoro technique or the Feynman technique, or study for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. That's not what this is about. This is also not about how to focus. This is also not about how to take notes. I'm not going to teach you about special mind mapping techniques or anything like that. This presentation is about mindset. This is about strategy. This is about how to approach knowledge and information. This is about how to think. I want to redefine the role and nature of knowledge. This is about how to think. And if we can change how we think, we can change how we learn. I want this presentation to be about how we can actually learn in the modern day. And the reason I say actually learn is because if you think about it, we were never really taught how to learn. Who here was taught how to learn? Was it in kindergarten? I don't think so, right? We weren't really taught how to learn. And the reason I say modern day is because the educational landscape of today is very different from how it was 200 years ago. Because 200 years ago, information was scarce. There was value in having information, being a container of knowledge, because no one else had it. Today, if having knowledge was truly that valuable, then my phone can provide more value than every single professor in the school. But that's not the case, because having knowledge is not providing value. There's something more. And that something more is being able to think critically. So how do we get there? And that's what I want to talk about. So this presentation is about educational strategy. This is about how to approach information. And this method I'm going to talk about will effortlessly and almost accidentally enhance your retention of information, but more importantly, shape you into a capable, critical, and effective thinker. This is my promise to you. By the end of this presentation, you will have a basic foundation of this method and be able to apply it in your studies, and I guarantee you that you will see an improvement. Now that's a pretty big promise, but I'm going to stand by that. So now I'm going to turn it to you guys. I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm going to propose a scenario, and I want you to tell me if you have ever felt this way. All right? So when I was a senior in college, I had more time, so I decided I want to read books. So I picked up a book on evolution, and I decided to read the first 2 chapters. And it took me a while. But after I read a little bit of the book, someone asked me, hey, so what is that book about? And I just read the first 2 chapters. And he asked me, okay, so what'd you read about? I don't know. I mean, it's something about evolution. I think the weak ones die and the strong ones survive. Has anyone ever felt like that? You read something, but then when you have to articulate what you just read, it's difficult. You don't exactly know what to say. Who here has felt like that before? Let me give another example. Have you ever studied something and be like, all right, I understand this. But then when you look at a question that you know is related to this topic, you're like, I've never seen that before. I don't know what that is. And has anyone ever experienced that before? All right? So this is my question to you. Why does that happen? You can just give me any ideas. I'm listening to you guys.
Perhaps the large volume of information that you have to take in.
Okay, for sure. Definitely a large volume of information. What else?
I think you're probably not like really internalizing the information, you're kind of just skimming, so then you have to like apply it and
Okay, so we're not internalizing the information when we're reading it. That's a really good point too. Anybody else? It's okay to be wrong. It took me 10 years to get to here, and it's still a work in progress.
I mean, it's kind of like the same thing. I feel like
Yeah.
I just zone out. Like, I just see words on a page and I just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like passive, right? It's hard to keep focus when you're just reading something. All three of you guys made really good points, and I'm going to address that in my presentation because you guys are absolutely correct. So this is the conclusion that I came to. The conclusion that I came to is that the reason we can't apply the information we just studied and we know that we know is because our approach is wrong. Our approach was to master the knowledge. Sounds like a great end goal, but it's the wrong approach if we want to be able to apply that information. So I'm going to give you guys what I'm saying the approach should be. And this is what I'm going to call the paradigm shift, the learning paradigm shift. It's a few principles. They're going to seem abstract at first, but I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to explain them, and I'm going to give some examples and basically explain them for the rest of the presentation. So this is the first component of this mindset shift I'm talking about. We used to treat knowledge as the end goal. We're going to change that now. From now on, knowledge is not the end goal. Knowledge is not the focus. Knowledge is just a tool. So what is the tool for? Okay. The tool is to achieve some objective. The objective can be overcoming a challenge, tackling an obstacle, or solving a problem. It seems abstract, but hold on. I'm gonna get to the explanation. So we understand the tool and we understand the objective, but if knowledge is not the end goal, then what is the end goal? The end goal is to become a capable thinker. So it's not about being a container of knowledge. It's about being a thinker. Can you use the knowledge that you have, even if it's limited, to solve the problem? That's what really matters today. And if we combine these three components, that is how you make learning inevitable. So I'm going to recap what I just said. The first thing is that knowledge is a tool. The second thing is that this tool is going to be used to accomplish some kind of objective, which in this case I'm saying is to solve the problem. And the end goal is becoming a capable thinker. If we change our mindset to this, what I'm telling you is that the inevitable byproduct is learning. And what I mean by inevitable is you will accumulate knowledge like it's an accident. That's how I felt like when I was doing this in med school. I felt like when I wanted to learn something, I didn't even have to try. It just came to me. I didn't have to use flashcards, no Anki. I didn't have to look at it more than once. I only looked at it once, and I moved on. And if I saw the question on the test, I got it right. That's what this is about. Learning should be effortless. The real difficulty should be the problem that you're solving, the objective that you're trying to accomplish. So for the rest of this presentation, now this is pretty abstract. We're going to go into examples. I'm going to give you guys, detailed explanation of how to implement this mindset and then why does it work. So that's going to be the rest of the presentation. Let's start with how to implement this. I'm going to keep it very, very simple. In order to implement a mindset like this, there's basically just one step. And it's not easy, but it's simple. And that step is to apply the information before you comprehend it. Application before comprehension. Now, what does that mean? Because that kind of doesn't make sense. If you don't comprehend information, how are you going to apply it? That's exactly my point. I'll give you some examples. If you are a medical student, solve clinical cases before you study the disease. If you are an architecture student, build a prototype of a building before you study architectural principles. If you are a computer science student, create an app before you study the details or the intricacies of coding or how some functions work. If you're learning a language, don't study the grammar rules first. Try speaking with a native before you go to the grammar rules. So these are a few examples. And now I want to talk about why does this work? Why does this actually make sense? So this is what I like to call creating a cognitive appetite. So I gave you guys a few examples, but we didn't really go into why does that work. If I solve clinical cases as a medical student before I study the disease, why will that help me learn the disease better? I'm going to give you guys a really cool example. Let's say you decide you're going to go build some muscle at the gym, right? What does that look like? You're going to go to the gym, you're going to pick up a weight that is slightly heavier than you can manage, right? Not too easy, not too difficult, but slightly harder than you can manage, and you're going to get some reps in, right? Now, by the time you're finished with the gym, your muscles are starving for nutrients. They need something to grow. So what do? You go back home, you make a protein shake, and you drink the protein. Now the protein knows exactly where to go. If I train my biceps that day, the protein is going to go to my biceps, not my shoulders, right? So what just happened there? When I went to the gym and I lifted weights that were slightly heavier than I can manage, I created a need for that protein. I created a craving for that protein. My muscles wanted that protein. This is the same thing as saying, before you learn about organic chemistry, try applying yourself to organic chemistry problems first. Find out what's missing. Create confusion, ask questions, form hypotheses. And then when your brain truly needs the information, then you give it the information. You apply yourself before you comprehend it, and when you finally get to the information has a place to go. Now think about how our education system is structured right now. You go to class, and what does your professor do? He's like, eat this, eat that, eat all this protein. So you drink 5 protein shakes in class. Then you go to the library and you review the protein you just ate. And then you're going to eat some more by reading the textbook and watching YouTube tutorials online. And then a week before the test, you finally decide to go to the gym. But the test is not about how much protein you can eat or how much protein you are able to eat. It's about, can you perform some problem? Can you perform some function? Can you solve a problem? So what's essentially happening here is that when we approach a problem but are not fully ready for it, we quickly realize what we do not know. And when we fill that information, when we fill that gap with knowledge, there's already a context and a purpose for that knowledge, right? It's not some vague sense of motivation like, oh, I might actually need this. It's like, I saw the problem. I know exactly what tool I need to solve this problem. I just don't have the tool. The tool is knowledge. So what does creating a cognitive appetite actually do? It gives a context and purpose to that information before you even have the information. And what is actually happening in your mind when you encounter a problem that you're not yet ready for? You create confusion, you ask questions, and you form hypotheses. Now, this is not a very pleasant process. Being confused is not easy. It's pretty frustrating. But that's very important because confusion is not the end of learning. It doesn't mean you failed. Confusion is the beginning of learning. If you are not getting confused, that means you are not lifting weight that's heavy enough. It should hurt in the gym. Otherwise, you're not creating a need for the knowledge. Does that make sense? At least the gym analogy makes sense, right? So when should we approach the knowledge? Approaching a knowledge should be after we applied ourselves. After we know, okay, I'm looking at this problem. If only I had this, then I would be able to solve that problem. If only I had this tool. Well, we know that knowledge is a tool. right? So when we finally look at the books later on, I don't know how to describe it, but it just works. It's just like there's a place in your brain for the information. Now we created a space for the information to fit. And as soon as we get the information, it just sits right in place and it doesn't leave. And I can give you an example of this. So I'm currently a third year right now in medical school. And for every exam that I've taken, I've studied for in a slightly different way. So the reason I did that is because I was experimenting. So the exams were not really a reflection of my hard work or my, or my intellectual capability. They were a function of the way that I studied, because my brain and my work ethic was pretty much the same throughout, right? So what I noticed was that for a specific test that I did the best on, it was when I looked at the textbook a week before the test. I looked at the textbook a week before the test, and for that exam, I scored the highest. But what did I do the entire time before I looked at the textbook? All I did was look at practice problems. The first day of my gastrointestinal exam, I tried solving problems. I opened up a question bank, I looked at the first question, and I had no idea what I was looking at. But I still did it anyway. I dissected the problems, and I found, wow, I have no idea what the stomach does if this happens. Then I'm like, okay, I need that to solve this problem here, but I don't know the answer. And when I look at the book, I see the answer, and it just locks it in. That is not leaving. There's a utility to that piece of information. There's a context, there is a purpose. And that came before I even went to the textbook. So what I did was I spent 4 or 5 weeks just looking at practice questions, solving as many as I can. The first practice question I did, I took 2 hours. It was one question. I spent 2 hours on that one question. On the exam, you're supposed to spend less than 90 seconds. But the week before the test, I opened the textbook and I flew through the textbook because I felt like everything was starting to click. I'm sure all of us have felt that before when it just clicks, right? Has it happened to us before? We can control this process. We can control the clicking. We can make it click when we want to, right? So that's a quick example. So we should approach the knowledge after we've applied ourselves. So you can kind of see that I'm basically repeating the same exact thing multiple times because I'm really trying to drive this point home. Okay, so I want to make a point about formal education. This is going to tie a little bit of what we talked about together, and the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm going to compare it to something I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So what is the end goal of formal education? And we talked about this already, so you guys tell me, what is the end goal of this educational system that we are in right now?
To apply it effectively in your life.
Yeah, exactly. It's to become an effective thinker, to be able to apply that information. That's what it is. Now, something I didn't address yet was, we know that the end goal is becoming a capable thinker. We know that knowledge is now a tool, it's not the end goal. But in order to actually do this, we have to accomplish the objective, solve the problem, overcome the challenge, make it through an obstacle. But what does that actually look like? What is the objective? The objective should simulate the end goal. So I'll give you a really cool example. So for example, in medical school, we have simulation centers where we can pretend to be doctors with a robot patient, and the professors just watch us from behind a double looking mirror, right? So I have me and my friends, we have a patient, and the patient is undergoing cardiac arrest, right? Now, if I want to learn about cardiac arrest, what I'm proposing is simulate the end goal first before you actually learn about cardiac arrest protocols. So instead of preparing myself for the simulation by, the first thing you do is you give this drug, then you make sure this, then you do this drug. If nothing is working, do this. Instead of reading that before, my proposal, what I'm saying is go into the simulation blinded. I don't know anything about cardiac arrest protocols. I'm going to look at the patient and be like, okay, how do I save this patient's life with my team, right? So the objective should simulate the end goal. And let's say I finished that simulation, I'm like, wow, like I didn't know that, the first thing you should do is give this drug. Why do you do that? I mean, think about it. During a cardiac arrest simulation, like I'm stressing out because the patient is gonna die. So I have a lot of confusion going on through my head. And if I have all those confusions, the questions, the hypothesis, and then I come to the information later, all of the information has a place to sit in my mind. My entire goal with this slide is basically saying that the objective should simulate the end goal. Now I want to contrast this to leadership. Now, if you guys don't know, this talk is part of a much bigger event called Lead Week, where we are teaching undergrad students how to be the best leaders that they can be. So I want to talk about leadership a little bit. How can you apply this technique or this strategy to learning? Well, what's the end goal of leadership? This is pretty obvious. Become a leader, right? And if you notice, the end goal of the previous one was becoming a capable thinker. The end goal is always who you become at the end. It's about you. It's not about what you have, it's about you. So the end goal of leadership is becoming a leader. So now let me ask you guys, what should the objective be based on what I told you on the last slide in order to achieve this end goal? It's more obvious than you think. Simulate being a leader. Exactly. So why is it that we spend so much time sending our students to workshops? Read this leadership book, talk to this leader, he'll give you good advice, when these students never actually did anything in the first place. That's the completely wrong order. What we should be doing as budding leaders is throwing ourselves into these situations where we have to perform as a leader. That is the only way to actually become a leader. That is by actually being a leader. If you want to be a leader, guess what? You actually just have to lead. You can look at the leadership principles later. You can talk to the people who know what they're doing later, but the first thing you got to do is apply yourself. Simulate the end goal. Now I want to give a little story here because I'm going to talk about why I'm doing all of this. A lot of you guys know this is not the first presentation I'm doing like this. I had one in November, and if you guys want to know the truth, I don't know how many people know, but this is the 4th or 5th presentation that I've done about learning. The first 2 were about how to be a memory champion, and then when I realized that that's not the right way, I completely switched it up to this. But I want to talk about, just for a minute, why I'm doing this. So last November, I went to one of my professors at medical school and I was just asking for advice. So this professor, he's amazing. He's a retired cardiothoracic surgeon, and at the moment he was training M4s, 4th year medical students, for residency interviews. And I was like, this is a great time to ask him something. I asked him, what is the best example of leadership you have ever seen? It's a pretty good question to ask someone who's basically seen everything. So what he told me, I was not expecting. And I'm not exaggerating. I did not expect this at all. Because in my head, I'm like, leadership is being the president. Leadership is being Elon Musk. It's being Steve Jobs. It's being Tim Cook. It's about leading a field. It's about providing a vision and allowing other people to buy into that vision, and you create real change in the world. That sounds pretty awesome, but that's only one definition of leadership. What he told me was a completely different definition of leadership. And I had this idea before because I used to read books on leadership before I actually did anything about leadership. But when he told me this, it reminded me, I'm like, wow, I never really thought of it that way. I'm going to tell you exactly what he told me. He gave me one example. Oh, there's an M4 right now who used to be, a state level champion in tennis, and now he coaches tennis. I'm like, that's a leader? Give me another example. Okay. He said, oh, there's another M4 who is who used to be an Olympic ice skater, and now she's teaching other kids to get to that level. Like, that's leadership? It's like, yeah, that can be leadership too. So that's when I realized that leadership doesn't just have to be providing a vision. and creating change in the world. But what it could also be is helping other people become the best that they can be. Helping other people provide value for themselves in their own life. Helping other people become the best that they can be. So once he told me that, I was just like, wow, like that makes sense. It's almost like a mentorship that he kind of described. So that was my end goal. And I knew what the objective was. The objective was to do exactly that, to be a leader. So this is what I would recommend to anyone who wants to be a leader. Be clear on what your definition of a leader is, and then just do it. So in this season of my life, for the past year and probably for the next 4 years, my definition of leadership is helping other people to become the best version of themselves. That's what I'm going to commit to. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm going to make this announcement at the end of the presentation, but I am also opening up my time to helping you guys in a mentorship kind of way, one-on-one, to provide as much value as I can. I'm going to talk about that later. But the whole point of this slide is to talk about leadership, and is to talk about how we can apply this learning strategy to almost anything. If you want to learn how to play music, don't read a book and look at what chords to play. Just go for the song, you know? If you wanna play chess, I've started playing chess recently. Don't study what moves to play when your opponent plays something. Just play a game and then review your mistakes. And then that will come automatically. Now when I look at a book or online and I look at tutorials, oh, this is what you play, there's a place for it in my mind because I needed that information. All right. Now I'm gonna sum up this entire presentation, and it really comes down to a very, very simple idea. The mindset shift, how to implement it, and why does it work? What is the mindset shift? The mindset shift is knowledge is no longer the end goal. Knowledge is now just a tool. Don't try to master all the knowledge, because that's the wrong way to do it. So if knowledge is a tool, what is the end goal? The end goal is to become a capable thinker. The objective is to solve a problem. It's to overcome a challenge or get past an obstacle. And the inevitable byproduct is learning. It's going to be an accident. Knowledge will come to you accidentally. You don't even have to try. So how do you implement this mindset? Very simple. Apply the information before you are ready, before you have the information. And why do you do this? You do this to create a cognitive appetite. Create a genuine need for the information before you actually get it. Go to the gym before you eat your protein, right? If you eat all the protein you can, where is it gonna go? It's not gonna go into your muscle. You can't be a couch potato and expect to be a bodybuilder looking guy if all you do is sit on the couch and drink protein shakes. If you do that, it's all gonna come out the other end. Just like knowledge, if you don't create a place for it in your mind, you have to create a place before you go get the knowledge. I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm doing that on purpose. So if you weren't paying attention to my presentation until this point, this would be a great time to start, because I'm going to summarize this entire thing in one sentence. This is what I want you to do. Start by studying and solving the problem, the obstacle, and the challenge first. The first thing you do is apply yourself. Don't look at the book. Don't ask for help. Just dive in, get confused, get frustrated, ask questions, and when you need the tool to solve that problem, when you know exactly what tool you need, that is when you go to the books. I'm gonna leave you guys with a quote. If you wait till you are ready, it will be too late. Learning starts with immediate action. And that's it. Thank you. Little announcement. So I have been on this learning journey for 10 years now. I have experimented, I have failed, I have reflected so much on this process, and I realized that I thought about it so much that this summer I decided to write down everything that I knew about this topic. So I actually wrote a book on this topic, and I finished this book last week. So this is what I'm offering to you guys. Like I said before, the reason I'm doing this is because this is my definition of leadership. I want to help other students become the best versions of themselves. I want to provide as much value as I can. That is why I am doing a mentorship thing. No one's hosting me. This is just me. I'm going to do a one-on-one kind of mentorship thing with you. This is going to be a mentorship such that I'm going to help you implement this technique. I mean, I understand this presentation is not really going to change your life. You know, this is a process. This is the first step. So I want to walk people through this process. I want to help you guys. I want to show you that this is the right way to do this, or that there's always a better way. That's what I want to show you. In addition, whoever decides to become a mentee, I will also send them my book, and I would like you to read it. You can give me feedback, and hopefully in the near future, I will publish this book. So if this sounds like something you would be interested in, if you found this presentation helpful at all, then go ahead and scan the QR code. All you have to do is put in your name and email. I am going to pick 3 to 4 people because my time is limited. I can't take everyone. But my time is limited, so I'm going to pick 3 to 4 people. All you got to do is put your name and email, and there's a description where you can just tell me a little bit about what you hope to get. That way I don't have to pick out of a bunch of names, if there's that many people who actually want this. But that is all that I have for today. I'll take any questions, but I really hope that you found that helpful, and thank you guys for coming.